You only have to change 2 to 3% of the world on a yearly basis to bring about an entire civilizational change. Uh, so it's daunting. There are a lot of very deeply entrenched, very powerful forces that represent the status quo of self-destruction, and they're getting more powerful all the time. So it is something of a race.
Here we are, Jen. It's our last episode of season 1 of Connected with Jen and Shannon.
And if you're just joining us on the podcast, we're all about connection, communication, and how being fully human just might save us from ourselves.
And today's guest, we are so excited to invite John Vervaeke. Okay, his list of accomplishments are vast, but let's just name a few.
He's an award-winning professor at the University of Toronto, specializing in psychology, cognitive science, and Buddhist psychology. He's the director of the cognitive science program there. His YouTube series, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, is wildly popular, and he's known for his work in bridging wisdom traditions and modern science. I'm over the moon at having him as a guest.
Me too, Jen. We are so glad you're here.
Dr. John Vervaeke, thank you so much for being here. Oh my goodness, I am so excited to start this conversation with you. So I've been following your work for years, and the first thing I want to chat about, though, is meaning making and something that you call the meaning crisis, right? We've lost in our modern society this meaning and purpose. And I am interested for you to define the meaning crisis for our audience. What does it mean to you? What did we lose, and how can we get it back?
Yeah. So there's a book that's one half of it, and there's a 50-hour video series, so no problem.
Right.
What I mean, first of all, just ask people to think intuitively. Do they feel that they belong cleanly to the world? Do they understand how they're connected to a bigger picture? Do they feel that the society is ordered, that it's giving them access to the true, the good, and the beautiful, or is there an increasing sense of bullshit, alienation, fragmentation, disconnection, loneliness? Now you're starting to get at least the intuitive sense of what I'm talking about. And does your life careen between burnout and boredom? So these are the things. And there's an aspect of this that is perennial. Human beings always are wrestling with the possibility of falling into despair. So what we have to ask is, what addressed these perennial problems? And how have we lost those perennial responses to the perennial problems that give us a particular crisis of meaning right now, that shows up in some of those symptoms that we've talked about? So let's talk about very quickly what connectedness, what meaning is. Meaning is, it's like, there's a metaphor here. It's like the meaning of a sentence. But we're not talking primarily, and this is really important, by the way, we're not talking primarily about linguistic meaning, the meaning that's held in your spoken or thought propositions. We're talking about something deeper. We're talking about a sensed presence of a sense of connectedness, that you're very connected to your own body, and you're connected to other people, you're connected to the world. And importantly, people often use the metaphor, they're connected to something larger than themselves. But what that really means is, think about like when you're dreaming and you're in this little world and it seems real, and then you wake up, awakened, Buddha, the awakened one, or the lights go on, enlightenment. You're in a bigger room, and from that bigger perspective, and notice the word I just used, please remember it, bigger perspective, not just a new proposition. You move to a different perspective, and you can see the limitations and the disconnection from reality in your smaller perspective. So you're trying to be connected to something that's more real. Now, the important thing about meaning is, let's talk about it sort of two dimensions. One is you exist at sort of three levels. I'm trying not to use any jargon here. You live at the level of your agency. You're the kind of being that can seek out the conditions and alter the world to increase the chances of you existing. That's a fancy way of saying you're a living being and therefore you're an agent. Unlike this bottle that can't seek out the conditions to preserve its existence, or even a fire, which is dynamic and self organizing, but it'll burn itself out. You and a paramecium, by the way, right? A microbe, even a paramecium will swim away from poison and swim towards more food. So that's your level of agency. So you have a sense of connectedness that has to do with your agency. Can you interact with the world? Can you bring your skills to bear on the world in a reliable manner? Because when human beings get in situations where they can't exercise their agency and they can't acquire or apply skills, they suffer very significant trauma. Okay, so that's a very basic level. The next level up is, because of the kind of being you are, you can use narrative and perspective taking to extend your agency. You can point at a photograph and say, of this little 4-year-old, and say, there I am, right? Right? Because you can use narrative to extend your sense of self back in time, forward. And because you can practice taking other people's perspective on you, you can take a perspective on yourself. You can become what's called metacognitive. I can ask you, what are you thinking right now? And so you are metacognitively reflective and you are narratively extended. That makes you a self. You're not just an agent, you're a self. And there are other organisms that are selves. They pass what is called the self test. There's a bunch of tests. Chimpanzees, elephants, probably Caledonian crows, probably porpoises, right? So they're selves. But you're one level, and you have needs of meaning at that level. Yourself needs to be narratively connected and reflectively connected, not just agently connect. So this is your perspectival knowing and your sense of identity, right? Who am I? What am I? Where am I going? Right? And you have those parts of you, that part of you needs to be connected above and beyond just you being able to exercise power. You have to have that sensed, of taking the right perspective so that you can take the right role in any situation you're in. And I presume you're doing it right now. Your agency is, you're bringing the right skills. Neither one of you are trying to swim right now or anything like that. You got your right skills in place. You're taking the right perspective and you're bringing the right role. Like, for example, I don't know, I don't mean presume, maybe one or two of you is a mother, but you're not bringing, I hope not, your mother role to bear right now. That would be weird and inappropriate, right? You have the right perspective on this situation. So yourself is showing up. But there's one level more. And then this is how you're different from all the other organisms that we know about. You can make promises. You can't get any other organism to make a promise. And this is your personhood. This is your ability to make promises to others and have others recognize you and make promises back to you. And this is you to start to share in promise making, promise keeping, obligation, permission. This is to belong to a community. And there are no communities without persons, and there are no persons without communities. This is your sense, right, and think about the sense of connectedness you have here. Many people are longing for community because they don't have a good normative. So when you're making promises, you enter what's called the normative space. What does that mean? Normative means you care about what's true, what's good, and what's beautiful. Okay, so you look for a community because what you're looking for is you're looking for recognizing and being recognized in terms of the true, the good, and the beautiful. And so you have meaning needs up there. So many people will say, I'm hungry for community. So like a lot of Gen Z people, young adults, are returning to churches, specifically the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, the more ritual churches, the more traditional churches, because they're seeking community. And so you can think about meaning in life as, okay, you've got needs to connect as an agent, you have needs to connect as a self, and you have needs to connect as a person. And you have to make sure that all of those are aligned this way, and then they have to be connected this way, which is, what does it mean? Well, we've gotten into a very bad model of meaning. This is a video essay I'm working on right now with Arjun Arora, one of my students. We think of meaning as a personal preference that has to do with our self-esteem. Like, I'm John
Mm.
Vervaeke. I make my meaning. There may be no meaning in the universe, but I make my own meaning. But see, that's not how skills work. The skills have to be responsive and responsible to the environment. Your agency is embedded into recognizing and responding to the world. Selves have to have a perspective. You have to be able to indwell other people's perspectives and internalize their perspectives. You need to be doing that. And that depends on people other than yourself. And meaning has to be shareable. So if I okay, I know if meaning isn't this is the great work of Wittgenstein and Heidegger. If it is not shareable, meaning also mutually correctable, if you can't recognize what I'm saying and correct me and vice versa, there is meaning. So there is no meaning. So the idea that meaning is a personal preference is part of the problem. It's an isolating, possessive idea rather than what it should be, which is an idea that is emphasizing connection, mutual correction, mutual shareability, mutual creation. And it's not a possession, it's a developmental process. So that's what meaning is. And we have to have a society that is conducing us in all these levels. And sorry, I'm almost done. And what that means is we face a challenge. I'll get into it later, but this connectedness, this is, I would argue, is based on our fundamental intelligence, which is our ability to do relevance realization. We'll talk about later. The key to relevance realization is to make oblivious vast amounts of information and make obvious what you should do. That's when you say, that's what you mean when you say that's relevant. You're ignoring it, you're not caring about this, and you're caring about that. And you're committing your time and attention and your resources. The problem with that, you need to do that, by the way. It's absolutely necessary for your agency, your selfhood, and your personhood. But the problem is often what you're ignoring is what turns out to be actually relevant to your problem. And you know that you've done this when you have your moment of insight, when you go, aha, oh, I thought she was angry, but she's actually afraid. And what you foregrounded gets shifted, your perspective shifts, the role you take shifts, and the skills you bring to bear shift, right? And so what you need is you need practices that don't mess up the meaning-making machinery, but intervene to try and deal with all the self-deception that we're prone to at the level of your skills and your perspectives and your personhood and your identity. You need an entire ecology of practices because that stack is complex and it's looping with the world. That's what I believe wisdom is. So the relationship between meaning and wisdom is intrinsic. Our culture has decided, in its infinite lack of wisdom, that it's going to be the one culture that separates meaning in life from the cultivation of wisdom. You don't need to have be cultivating wisdom. You don't need to be sharing your meaning. Just follow your personal preferences, and that will make your life meaningful. And that's very, very, very problematic because that's not how meaning actually works. And so we are suffering from a lack. We need an ecology of practices that allow people to cultivate wisdom, not primarily in propositions, but in terms of their skills and perspectives and roles and identities and how they belong and participate in community. Where do they go for that? They need role models because you need role models to learn skills and to learn perspectives and to cultivate your character, to take on the appropriate roles and identities. Where are those role models for us? Where are the long intergenerational traditions that have tried out these role models and these ecologies of practices across varying historical context and environments? So they've stood the test of time and multiple places. We used to have that. It was called religion. And the West has decided to abandon religion, at least consciously. There's a lot of unconscious religion running around because you can't really get rid of it. And so what happens is people are looking for. Wisdom is not optional. They're looking for it. So what are the two fastest growing demographic groups? The nuns, NONESs, no religious affiliation. But what's the other one? Spiritual but not religious. Everybody and their uncle is spiritual but not religious. What that actually means anthropologically is I'm religious, but I don't trust any institutions. Because the meaning crisis is also a belonging crisis, which is also a trust crisis. And we're in the trust apocalypse right now, what McKinnon calls the trust apocalypse. Trust for all institutions is at an all-time low. Because if we can't, listen, this is really important. I'm not speaking to you. I'm trying to get the listeners. If we can't share meaning, we can't belong. And if we can't share meaning and belong, we can't trust. And if we can't trust, we won't start sharing meaning. And if we don't start sharing meaning, we don't belong. And you get this vicious cycle that we're in. That's the meaning crisis. I tried to do it as fast as I could.
That was super, and that was fast, and that was amazing.
4 pages of notes. I am overwhelmed with things to talk about, Jen. So I'm gonna let Jen do her digging because this is what she does best.
So I have a million places to go, but I'll start here. Just because we left on truth and trust, I think, or trust, and that makes me think about truth.
You
right?
should. They're etymologically related. Truce, trust, and troth, like in betrothal, all have the same etymological origin. Yeah.
And so how can I find truth if I don't have trust, right, in my community?
Yep.
Or define truth as a community rather than my own truth, right?
Yeah.
What is that? We hear that a lot, John.
Yeah.
This is my own truth. And I want to wrap vulnerability into that somewhere, right? Like I have to allow myself to be vulnerable enough to trust in some community to help find truth and engage in a dialogue so that I can better understand that outside of my own individual agent.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jen, because the research is just becoming overwhelming on this. Dan Chiappi and I are doing a lot of work on this. Your ability, my ability to detect our own self-deception is very poor. Very poor. We're very bad at it, and it's metabolically very costly. Like it costs people lots of effort. We're really good at noticing other people's biases. This is why we're such geniuses at other people's romantic lives and so pathetic in our own, right? Because you can say, you're doing that silly thing you always do. And when you're doing it again. But when people try to point out yours, no, it's different. This, right? You know that. You really, and what this means is since the European Enlightenment and the birth of modernity, we've adopted the wrong model. And it leads to this my truth. It's the idea that what reason is primarily a monological computation done in your head. The problem with that is that the cognitive science, the psychology and the neuroscience is completely undermining that model. We actually reason much better dialogically. We are each other's best source of self-correction. So you take a standard reasoning task like the waste and selection task. These are the cream of the crop of our society. We're testing them. Only 10% of it get it right. You replace it with that one person with 4 people and encourage them to talk cooperatively with each other. And the success rate goes from 10% to 82%. And this is like one of many, many, many findings, right? So, and this is what we had in Plato, the portrayal of philosophy and reason as something done dialogically. But then we have shifted progressively into it's monological and it's monological computation in my head. What that means is as long as all of this coheres with itself, I have truth. That's not how truth works. That's not how truth works, because you're pretending that your knowing is primarily just the coherence of your propositions. But remember what we said earlier? It's not primarily that computational. It's about your skills. which have to fit the world. It's about your perspectives, which have to take other perspectives into account, because you can't become metacognitive. Have you ever asked a 3.5-year-old what's going on in their head? They can talk. They'll say blood, because they haven't got the
Interesting.
ability to reflect on their own, because they haven't practiced enough taking other people's perspectives. That's why they can't tell stories. That's why they don't get metaphors or jokes, right? All that perspectival stuff is missing, right? And your sense of having a role, of being connected and belonging. So, for example, there are syndromes that people have where all of their propositional knowledge and even their skills, like they can still use their arm and they can describe their arm perfectly, but the syndrome is they lose the sensed presence. They lose that participatory perspectival, and they'll say, "This isn't my arm. I want it amputated." Or they'll say, "That's not my wife. She's been replaced by an identical robot." We forget that a lot of this implicit, non-propositional sensed presence is what gives us our deepest sense of being connected to reality, which is our fundamental sense of what truth is. Truth isn't the coherence of our propositions, it's the degree to which we can successfully conform to, couple to, belong to the dynamics of the environment. It's not about sitting back here and computing. It's about it's more like, can I indwell the world and internalize it? Can I shape myself to the world and shape the world to me? And that, of course, is what culture is. We figured out a long time ago that we can shape ourselves to the world and shape the world to us. So saying that you're like, first of all, when you say that's my own truth, did you invent the English language you're using? Did you invent the whole philosophical history and the Enlightenment that led to that? Did you invent the society and the cultural system that gave you ideas of individual rights and glorifies autonomy and individualism? Like, come on. This is pretense. Stop doing that. There is no such thing as my truth. And my truth and my meaning are like this, and they can't work. Because as you said, if I can't trust other people, I won't be able to correct myself or learn to reflect on myself. There's no self-reflection or self-correction without deeply trusting other people.
This makes me think of where we are in our world right now with social media.
Yes.
Okay. There is no two-way discussion, right? It is a one-way blab, right? Without any thought, and it just goes out into the ether, and we hope for something good to happen, but what's happening, John, is a completely, I want to say, false narrative, right? It is developing. So how do we find truth? How do we align ourselves like you're talking about when, what we're faced with?
So, easy question.
It's a tough one.
Tough one for sure.
I mean, the first of all is there's a lot you need to do. You need to do a lot of, and people can do it to varying degrees, because we can we can do a division of labor. So I'm not saying everybody has to do everything I'm saying. I'm just saying all of this needs to be done. We can figure out how to divide it up. What we need to do is to start taking seriously, and this is going to scare some people at first. So give me a moment, please. Don't just okay. We have to take seriously what postmodernity did. Okay, I have a lot of criticisms of postmodernity, but postmodernity basically said there's a deep flaw in modernity. What's that framework? So how do we get modernity? Modernity rejects the dichotomy of the medieval world. A dichotomy is a division in reality. It's not just a conceptual distinction. It's that these things are separate realities. What was that? The supernatural and the natural world. That gets rejected, and the natural world. The problem is, right, that was doing a lot of work. Okay, that was doing a lot of work. So what happens is, and this is part of the postmodern critique, is modernity builds in all these other dichotomies. It builds in, there's a dichotomy between mind and body, the subjective and the objective, the individual and the collective, right? values and facts, is and ought. We build all these dichotomies in. And then those dichotomies, let's just do one. Like this is William Desmond, who I will be talking to very soon and recording a
Ooh.
dialogue with. So he said, look, if we have the fact value dichotomy, if we think it's really the case that the world is divided up into fact and value, and science deals with fact and religion maybe does with value, but value is merely subjective and it's merely projected on the world. So it's subjective, which means it's not real, and it's projective, which means it's an illusion. So the value is an illusion. But why should the scientist then value the truth and value communicating it with other people? And why should he think that knowledge is a good thing? What's going on there? And what about the meaning? Meaning is a normative thing. He has to use meaning in order to do his science. But let's sit. So, first of all, we're already hitting something really, really problematic. And then you note, but what am I objectively? I'm an insignificant little blip that's just illusorily projecting some subjectivity. So there's nothing. It's just nihilism. There's just nihilism. And Desmond calls that default atheism. These dichotomies, they sever the connectedness that is the lifeblood of belonging, meaning, trust, and truth. And this was the great critique of postmodernity. Now, they do it in all kinds of extreme ways, and it has been like romanticism. It gets taken up popularly in a very decadent fashion, and they're still locked within the propositions. There's nothing but the text. There's nothing outside the text, to quote Derrida. They're locked. They're basically saying there is no computational rationality. All the dichotomies are false. All the binaries are illusory, but we're still trapped inside propositional computational thought. And it's like, no, we have our skills, procedural thought, we have our perspectives, perspectival thought, we have our roles and our identities, our participatory knowing, and these are actually our deepest sense of truth. So first of all, Shannon, you have to start looking for truth after taking apart the gridlock grammar, the glasses of modernity. And then once you do that, you start recovering the sensed presence of connectedness, and that it is not, right? Look, connectedness is neither subjective nor objective. It's transjective. It what connects them together. It's what glues them together. It's like the adaptivity of an organism. The adaptivity isn't in the organism and the environment, but how they really fit together. Meaning is a cognitive cultural adaptation. It's how we fit into the world, belong to it, fit with each other, belong with other people. So you have to start looking for truth, not as the coherence of your propositions, but how are you connecting? How are you connecting in such a way that you are overcoming self-deception, so that you are more and more getting a sense of insight, a sense of how inexhaustible the meaning that's available to you from the world is, how deeply you can enrich the lives of others, how much you are coming into a kind of inner connectedness and a deeper and deeper sense of connectedness to reality. And now the modern skeptic can say, well, that can all be an illusion. And I would say it can, except the only thing you can use, this is Spinoza's truth is its own criterion, the only thing you can use to judge if that's an illusion is a better connectedness. Like there's no place outside of that to stand where you can do your science that will allow you to say all of that. There is no view from nowhere. There is the no place from which I see everything all at once. That's both logically, Gödel, and physically, Einstein, impossible. That's how you start to look for truth. You have to really fundamentally deconstruct how we've been locked in to thinking about truth in terms of these dichotomies, and you have to, Ioannaris calls this the communal criterion of truth. You have to see that truth is embedded in the connectedness. You can't separate truth from meaning, belonging, and trusting. So, what is helping you belong more, find more meaning, trust more in such a way that other people can trust you more, find more meaning from you, belong more to you? And again, maybe that's all false. All you are doing is relying on that very process to make that pronouncement. And you're relying on the fact that that process is inherently self correcting, which is what your insight and what dialogue show. So that's what we have to do. And we have to cultivate ecologies of practices that train people in the skills of attention and mindfulness, connectedness, properly using the imagination to enhance perception rather than merely entertain us, cultivating character, belonging and participating in deep, communal, mutually transformative dialogue, which I call dialogos. And we are teaching people these skills. And when they start to these skills and these perspectives and these roles, and when they start to inhabit them, you know what they say to me, Shannon? They say, I've always been looking for this, although I didn't know it. That's how you look for truth.
Wow.
Wow, amazing. Thank you, John. Do you mind if I jump in, Shannon?
You
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I there's so much. We're talking about some ways, some practices that, John, you've been working on to engage people in dialogue so that they can appreciate narrative, so that they can come into community with one another.
Yes.
I would love to know a little bit more about some of those practices.
Feeling lost in the noise of social media? Inspo cuts through the clutter, connecting you directly with real insights from real experts and industry leaders. It's a new social network dedicated to knowledge sharing, industry insights, and thought leadership. Get the latest from top minds in your field, or build your own thought leadership portfolio on Inspo. Already trusted by thousands of professionals worldwide, be part of the conversation and download Inspo Experts today on the App Store or visit www.inspo.expert.
Sure. Happy. So, during COVID, I taught an online course on meditation, contemplation, the cultivation of wisdom to try and really help because I I predicted as a scientist that what COVID would do would reveal to people that their subjective, my truth, my world would be radically inadequate when they were actually severed from the mundane busyness of their everyday life. And of course, for a great many people, that really happened. And for a significant minority of people, that happened really badly. They went kind of crazy. And I actually said there'd be a mental health tsunami after COVID, and there was. And so the what grew out of that was you teach people two kinds of mindfulness practices, at least a meditative practice where you're stepping back and looking at your framing, looking for how it might distort. Then a contemplative practice, you're trying to look more deeply into reality, and you're going back and forth so that they mutually correct each other in what's called opponent processing. So those are mindfulness practices. You teach people imaginal practices. We have the Socratic imaginal self-reflection called scissor. It goes something like this. Please don't just try this off of my descriptions, everybody. Okay, I'm just doing this for the point of discussion. You need role models. You need people there when you practice. You can't learn a martial art just by listening to a brief description. Okay. But what you basically do is you try and get a sense of your internal state, and then you try to draw it on a piece of paper. But you're drawing it as in a really sketchy fashion because you're trying to draw it very sort of vaguely and ambiguously, not very determinatively. So the picture is suggesting to you as you're shaping the picture, you loop like this, and then you get to a certain state where you say, oh, this is really resonating with me. It's really ringing true. And then what you do is you imagine blowing that picture up so that it was the whole of the world. You're seeing the whole of the world through it. And then you do the opposite. You take it in and say, now it's the structure of my soul, this picture. And then you resonate between those. And then you step back and you open yourself up to any insight you need to have about like where you should be going or what you should be doing. And so this is an imaginal practice. This is not using your imagination to visualize things away from reality. It's using your imagination to enhance your, right, your interception and your perception. So you get this deep resonance ringing true. So you see more deeply into reality. That's an imaginal practice.
It
Go ahead.
it sounds like to me, right? This is opening me up to the possibility of other perspectives, this
Oh,
perspectival.
totally,
Right.
totally. So resonance, this is Hartmut Rosa's point. Resonance is when, like when you turn the corner and you see the beautiful snowfall or the beautiful sunrise. It requires, you are involved, but there has to be what he calls the uncontrollability of the world. If you just manufacture it, there's no resonance because you're not being put into a state, there's a technical term of criticality in the brain, which is the state you need to be in order to have insight, right? You need demand and surprise to get you into the state where insight becomes possible. It's called entropy. You have to introduce a certain amount of entropy in your cognition or you won't have an insight, paradoxically, because we like to think, no, if I can plan and control everything. So you're trying to do this kind of, you're trying to participate in the emergence of your picture, not manufacture it. And that takes a little bit of practice, as you can imagine, and some guidance. So you got mindfulness, you got imaginal, dialogical. So we teach people a series of dialogical practices. There's three core ones. There's philosophical fellowship, which was inspired by Ron Lahav's work, but it's not his. But what we do is we take a text, a philosophical text, let's say it's by Spinoza, and there'll be the reader, and the reader will do slow reading, read the text very slowly for everybody, like pausing so people are getting a chance. And what you're asking people is, don't wrestle and immediately with, if you agree or not. Try to understand Spinoza's perspective and his person. How is his personhood and how is his perspective showing up, such that it could challenge you? Okay. And then what happens is then the reader picks a phrase from the whole reading that he or she believes really picks up the whole of the passage, and you chant it in rounds. And people are chanting it. And so they're practicing no propositional inferential development, just resonating with it. And then you move to very short speech, in which what you try to do is express what is coming up from you and how are you sensing the presence. You're invoking Spinoza and what's being evoked from you. What's the evocation and the invocation that's happening here? And then the next person has to sort of pick that up, but also do what's being invoked and evoked. And you go around, and then you go into more extended speech where people say 3 or 4 things, and then you go into free speech. And what people get is what one person at one point described as a scientific seance. You get a sensed of Spinoza as a sage whose perspective and person can be there, like you're maybe like a beloved grandfather, somebody that who can now be a role model and give you a sense of other perspectives. But it's also, see, it's building a common unity for people around a philosophical text. Then we have what's called dialectic into dialogos, which is how can we use the fact that our group cognition is better than our individual cognition to give us something like Socrates, because we need more Socrates, as Kierkegaard said. So what you do is you have a person who is going to propose a virtue. Why a virtue? Because virtues are not just primarily our beliefs. To be honest isn't just to believe certain things. It's to have skills, to take the right perspective, and to have the right character traits. So what is honesty? I propose that honesty is, and then the midwife has to amplify this. They have to help draw it out, educe, the original meaning of education. Well, when you said the proposal, you leaned forward and did this with your hands. Go back, re-inhabit that. What's happening when you're doing that? Tell me more about your proposal when you resonate with your gesture. You kept using this metaphor. Or like when you said this, I'm not quite understanding what you meant by that. Could you say a little bit more about that? Or I'm not quite getting this part. So you don't challenge, you try to educe, you're trying to midwife, help them to, and people keep going more and more and more and more. There's 2 other roles. There's the vibe, and the vibe is watching, trying to pick up for when the virtue was present, when people go from just talking about honesty to exemplifying it. When did the virtue vibe? When did the virtue show up? Because people always start trying to enact the virtue in order to understand it. They almost right away. And then you have the scribe. The scribe is writing down the initial proposal and then how the proposal is changing. Okay, so the midwife finishes amplification, asks for a report from the scribe and the vibe, then says what they appreciate about this. What did they learn that they had not thought of before about honesty? Then they move to anticipation. What was missing? What was mysterious? Or maybe what was off or mistaken about it? This is where they get to be critical. Then they become the proposer. They turn, and all the roles shift one notch. Now the vibe is now the scribe, and the scribe, and everything just shifts. And you repeat this again, but the second proposer has to jazz from the first. They can't just drop the first proposal. They have to weave it. So common unity. You go around, you do all four people, and then when it's done, it's the virtue has shown up and the logos has shown up. The magical third factor is there. And it's taken on, you're in one of those conversations that's taking on a life of its own and taking everybody to places they couldn't have got to on their own. That's dialogos, by way of the logos. Then you go into free-flowing speech and you just follow the logos wherever it goes. That's dialectic into dialogos, for example. We have another practice called the Socratic search space, and I won't go into it because I feel like I'm talking too long, but it's a practice in which you're taking people to sort of describe a problem, a personal problem that they're having, and then you take them through a set of practices where they can abstract it by going through from the first person perspective to the second to the third into a shareable existential dilemma. Meaning has to be shareable. So what if your problem is a shareable existential dilemma? Then we work on what virtue would be appropriate for that existential dilemma that we can all resonate with. Then we do a little bit of dialectic into dialogos on that virtue, and then the person can take that resolution of the existential dilemma back into their personal problem. That's called the Socratic search space. So those are the kinds of practices we do. And we do movement practices. I teach Tai Chi Chuan. When we do the retreats, I'll do Tai Chi Chuan or we do yoga. Ethan has set up a whole bunch of movement practices in his Tiamat program. Ethan Say, one of my colleagues. So that gives you a taster of the kind of stuff we're talking about. We're doing scientific studies on this. We've done multiple workshops. We have presented this both in argument and in workshop form at an academic conference. We did this this year, the International Conference for Philosophical Practice. So there you go. That's a rough idea.
John, this reminds me a lot of this perspective taking kind of aligns with what Veena Sharma talks about when she talks about adult development. My question
I know her.
is,
We've met. We have met, yes.
so she's fabulous. We had her on the podcast. We talked a lot about this. So what I'm trying to think here is, how does maturity align with these discussions, right? Perspective taking is a mature way of thinking, right?
Yeah.
So you can't just, do this. You can't just have this conversation with anyone. Even adults, I'm thinking it's like some people really can't have that perspective taking.
Exactly. This is a proverb from the Hellenistic world. As the child is to the adult is to the sage. So you're exactly right. Now, this goes back to something that we've already laid the foundation for. If you think of meaning as a possession, you're in the having mode. This is what Fromm calls the having mode. And we have to have things. I have to have water. I have to have oxygen. And my attitude towards that is to control it and consume it. Right? Now, notice I can't take that role to Sarah, my spouse. I can't say, I'm with you because I can categorize you. You remind me of all the other women I've been with. I can easily control you and I can get what I want from you and consume it. How's my relationship going? It's really, really bad, right? what you want, right, is you want to move to what's called the being mode. You want to be in love, not just have sex. You want to be in love. And the being mode is the mode of maturation. So the being mode is not met by having something, it is met by becoming someone. I need to become, I need to mature honesty. I need to become honest. I need to become, right, more courageous. So notice that there is therefore a deep connection between maturation and the cultivation of wisdom and virtue and the generation of shared meaning. That's what Sarah and I have. Think about our most prominent metaphor for maturation. We think somebody is immature when they're highly self-deceived and they won't face up to reality. Think about what the opposite is. Somebody who's the opposite, who's systematically capable of seeing through self-deception so they can reliably face up to reality. That's the wise person. So that's the answer. There is no deep separation between wisdom is not optional. You need wisdom for meaning and maturation, and meaning and maturation are interwoven because meaning is interwoven with trust and belonging. We have forgotten that all of this is tightly interwoven, and we have willy-nilly carved it up in making everything autonomous and separate. The true is separate from the good, which is separate from the beautiful, and meaning is separate from fact. And because analysis has its place. I'm a scientist. I have a PhD in philosophy. I believe in clear analytic thought, but that is not how you ultimately get maturation and meaning, wisdom and virtue, and contact with reality. So maturation is another word for all of this.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I feel. That's what I try to tell my students. As I've raised children as as the child is to the adult is to the sage. I'm a child in comparison to Socrates or Siddhartha. And so I have to be able to trust them and imitate them beyond what I can currently understand, like a little kid has to do with an adult, in order to gain their perspective and their character so that I can finally see and be in the world the way they are. And I won't get there. I'm never going to be a sage, but I can mature in that direction.
And you can lead by example, right?
I hope so. I hope so. I really want. I really pray that I have the virtue and the virtuosity to be an example. We've all suffered it. I imagine you've suffered it. The person we sort of look up to, and then when we meet, we're disappointed. I don't want to do that to anybody. I don't want to do that to anybody.
You're not doing that to Jen and I. We have never been this excited yet on Connected with Jen and Shannon.
Right.
So we are riveted. Thank you.
You have that. The people that ask are my kids and my spouse. But they tell me that I'm a really good person and they think I'm maturing towards wisdom. So far so good.
All right.
Well, thank you for leading us, John. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, at least going a little bit ahead and helping you along the way. Yeah.
Thank you.
One thing that's
Jen?
one thing that's really resonating with me that you were just stating, John, was this entanglement of all of these notions that we're sharing that lead us to wisdom, that lead us to community. And I'm also noticing your entanglement of science and the spirit, right? This entanglement of not making that into a dichotomy. And I'll also mention in the practices, particularly the dialectic practices that you mentioned and dialogical, there were no dichotomies. I loved the interactions that you are bringing about that are absent of right or wrong, or that was the right. I think this, you think that. Anyway, these dichotomy, the absence of the dichotomy.
I just want to say, can I just say something to that, Jen? Sorry for interrupting, but people give up trying to be right in order to get right with the mystery that can be the common unity as everybody starts to realize what the virtues are. They move from trying to, I want to be right, to being in right relationship, to something that is inexhaustible and will always be on my grasp. It will always be affording and inviting me, calling me into greater maturation.
I
That
love
point.
that. I love that. That's what you're finding in these practices.
Yeah. They're being called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
No,
lo-
notice that sense of being called is at the heart of those things that we actually, not sort of intellectually, but actually use to judge realness. So think of a really good argument. You find that argument compelling but not compulsive. You agree with it, but you don't feel like you're being enslaved or losing your agency. You feel like, yeah, 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 that's right. That's a good argument, right? Or beauty, right? Beauty is compelling, but you don't feel like you're losing your agency. You're feeling like you're coming into fulfillment. Or when you're in the flow state, or when I love Sarah, I can do no other than love her, but I don't feel entrapped. I feel the most alive I've ever been in my life. Voluntary necessity. These are the things that call us. And it's no coincidence that all of these things, faith is that. Faith is not believing things without evidence. It's having that sense of being called by voluntary necessity that's in reason, in love, beauty, flow, resonance. And those are the moments when we feel that we're most in touch with reality.
It's those moments where we can just be present, right?
Yes.
Right with what we are experiencing in that very second, or something we call mindfulness, right? So
Yeah. Yes.
that's kind of how I think of it. We have to actually be present. We have to slow down enough even to get there.
So notice that you're noting that there are different senses of truth, or at least realness. There's the truth, the sense of conviction that the proposition is correct, but there's the sense of empowerment that your skills give you that gets a sense of realness. I really know what's going on because I can interact with the world. I'm swimming. I'm staying alive. This is really happening, right? Or as you're saying, Shannon, my perspective taking is giving me a sensed presence. I feel sensed, like I'm really present. I'm really here now. And the other people are really present to me. And that makes everything seem so real. And then the participatory, the sensed belonging. I somehow fit. I belong. And the world belongs to me, but not as my possession, right? We have these multiple senses of real. And voluntary necessity is a state that sort of calls them all together and calls us forward.
I learned two very important terms today: a scientific seance,
Oh,
which
me
is
too.
exactly what I would love to engage others in. I love that. And also the virtues,
Next month
the
in
virtue
California,
vibe.
Jen.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna virtue vibe. I need to be in a group where virtue vibe is happening. So, John, we've come to the point in the show that I need to ask you this question. If your vision for the world could be limitless, what would be your new bliss?
To participating in a cultural revolution in which wisdom cultivating communities were springing up and networking together as a viable alternative to the way the world is, and responding to a new sense of the sacred that's available to us. That's what I would love.
I am ready for that. That just got me so pumped, John, because I feel like that's what we're trying to do with this podcast. It's what we're trying to do with Blue Sky Leaders. We're trying to connect
Yeah.
people, to these ideas. And I feel like, we're taking this generation, we're trying into
Yeah.
this new space. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
We also like to wrap up with one word or phrase that each of us are going to take with us from this conversation. So what is the word, what is the thing that really resonates with you from our wonderful conversation here today?
Ready.
Jen's word, entanglement. The way all of
Ooh.
those were entangled together. I think that's amazing. And it's resonating me with even the notion from quantum mechanics, right? Entanglement, and the way
Entanglement.
meaning and truth and wisdom and maturation are all entangled together. That was delicious.
Oh, thank you, John. Oh my
Well,
God, my day has been made.
Jen's like her year.
Yes. Oh my gosh,
Do
thank
you
you.
your word?
I know.
You go next, Jen.
I know. I'm thinking all of your practices. I was just, I need to learn more about your practices, actually, John. So maybe I need to be reaching out and
I have a series dedicated to that. It's after Socrates is the philosophical historical framework. It's a lecture series, and then there's the series of practices, ending with dialectic into dialogos at the very end. Demonstrations of all the practices all the way
awesome,
through. It's after
awesome.
Socrates, you'll learn. You learn. Yep, there's like I said, there's a lecture series, kind of like Awakening, but it's not extensive, it's intensive. It's the Socratic, Platonic, Neoplatonic framework, because I think that is the framework that will allow us to stitch science and spirituality back together. And then running in exact parallel to that is a pedagogical program of practices leading up to dialectic into dialogos.
Thank you. Thank
I
you
came
so
up
much
with
for sharing that.
mine.
You did. Okay.
You're
All right.
John, you stimulated something in my brain, and I am so glad I took a second to think about it because this is a really great word. Okay, transjective. You know, I love that because I am always thinking of, well, perspective, objective. So I've never heard of transjective, but it is a goal, I think, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get into that meta space, that middle space that often is overlooked. Transjective, John.
Yeah, thank you. I came up with that out of 4E Cog Sci, the work I do on relevance realization. But then I discovered William Desmond, and he had a word from Plato, metaxu, which is the between.
Oh, okay.
So I have my one way I think of it now. I didn't think of it this way originally, but transjective is a 4E cognitive scientific translation of what Plato meant by metaxu. So.
I'm going to have to chew on that. That is something that I'm going to sit with, John. Thank
William
you.
Desmond's philosophy is absolutely needed today.
Yes. Thank you so much. All right, Jen.
All right.
Come on, Jen.
This is going to sound, this is surprising maybe because we talk about this all the time, Shannon, but the way, John, you were sharing connection with us, my word is connection. Because all of this meaning that we so desperately need and we have lost will be found in connection, in interpersonal connection, in that space. It's contextual. It's not in you or me, but it's within the connections among us. And my word is connection.
I often use the Latin word for that, religio. And then I talk about ratio, properly proportioned religio. And then one of my students made a bunch of T-shirts that said ratio religio on them. So,
all right, I want one. That's amazing.
We'll get you the #1 fan T-shirt over here, Jen.
Yeah, that's good.
But yeah, connectedness, and to come back to end with that, right, is so poetic because, of course, our podcast is called Connected.
Yeah.
And, we are connected. And that is the point of this because, Jen and I feel when that is awakened in a larger group of people, right, things can start to change. So let's get connected. Let's stay connected.
You only have to change 2 to 3% of the world on a yearly basis to bring about an entire civilizational change. So it's daunting. There are a lot of very deeply entrenched, very powerful forces that represent the status quo of self-destruction, and they're getting more powerful all the time. So it is something of a race. So
yes.
I'm expressing gratitude to find other people trying, like yourselves, trying to bring it about. So thank you.
Let's get that tipping point, right?
Yep.
Let's get to that tipping point and break it down here. So we're ready. All right. Thank you so much, John. This has been amazing. You have been so generous with your time and so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Both. Thank you both. I've had such a great time. What amazing hospitality. Thank you so much.
Oh.
Okay, everyone, we have something really important to ask, right? Jen and Shannon are over here trying to save the world, and we need your help.
This is how you can help us. Go to Spotify, go to Apple Podcasts, go to YouTube, and hit like and subscribe. And let us know what you think.
This is so important in the podcast world. Trust me, please go and do this. And here's the thing, we're building a community, and this is the first step.
We can't wait to see you there.